Formula One's confusing point system explained. For the second year in a row, Max Verstappen has been crowned world champion, and the FIA has had to over-explain why he is a champion. Although he dominated the entirety of the 2022 season, the ending in Suzuka under the rainy conditions brought out the best in the FIA, and they had to explain why the points had to be deducted the way they were. What's even more interesting is that even Max himself had no idea that he was a world champion, and he had to be reassured by the FIA and the officials. So, without further ado, let's talk about the point system that has confused F1 fans since the Japanese GP.
This is the only chance I'm being close to Mercedes. I'm not just sitting behind like a grandma.
The Japanese GP has started under very challenging conditions, as the rain made it impossible for the race to continue under safe conditions. After Sainz's crash at lap 1 and the incident with the recovery vehicle on track, the race was stopped at lap 3 due to Carlos Sainz's crash. There is a rule by the FIA that says that every F1 race needs to be finished within a time limit of 3 hours, regardless of the weather or the other conditions that are preventing the race. Last year's Belgian GP saw the drivers receive half of the points that were originally given to the drivers for the finishing positions. However, the circumstances were different back then, and the race hadn't even started due to the heavy rain. Therefore, points were given to the drivers in the qualifying order, with the winner, Verstappen, in this case receiving 12.5 instead of 25 points, and so on. Maybe F1 fans thought that the same rule would be applied here, due to the fact that the Japanese GP was shortened because of the rain. However, the FIA decided to award the drivers with full points rather than reduced ones, and they had to explain themselves yet again as to why it was done this way. At the end of the 2021 season, the FIA introduced a rule that would prevent another Spa 2021 happening yet again in the sport. The Belgian GP has indeed started, but only 2 laps were completed under the safety car, which wasn't actually racing per se. This means that you're not actually allowed to race because no overtaking is allowed behind the safety car, and those 2 laps don't quite count as racing ones. Nevertheless, the start of the GP was noted, and after the FIA had to experiment and give the drivers half of the points that their qualifying positions brought, everyone agreed that this made no sense, and further action needed to take place in the sport. Therefore, a scale system was introduced at the end of the 2021 season. So, the articles that are from essential importance to us are Article 5.4, 6.5, and Article 57. Let's start with the Article 57, which explains in which situations a race can be suspended. The Article 57 says that if competitors or officials are placed in immediate physical danger by cars running on the track, and the clerk of the course deems circumstances are such that the track cannot be negotiated safely, even behind the safety car, the sprint session or the race will be suspended. Should it become necessary to suspend the sprint session or the race, the clerk of the course will order red flags to be shown at all marshal posts and the abort lights to be shown at the line. The next article that has crucial importance for this cause is Article 5.4, and this is something that we mentioned earlier in this video, more precisely how long a full F1 race should be in distance. This article states that the minimum kilometers that a race needs to have under its belt is 305 kilometers in order for it to be classified as a full race. Also, 5.4 article says that should 2 hours elapse before the scheduled race distance is completed, the leader will be shown the end of session signal when he crosses the line at the end of the lap, following the lap during which the 2-hour period ended, provided this does not result in the scheduled number of laps being exceeded. More precisely, this means that once the lights go out, the race starts, and it has 2 hours to be completed in the event of the full amount of laps not being completed, without any suspensions in between. This article also talks about the time duration of a race in the event that a race is suspended once it has started, like in Japan. In this scenario, the length of the suspension will be added to this period for a maximum total race time of 3 hours. For instance, in Japan, the race got going but was stopped after Sainz aquaplaned and crashed out of the race. After this, there was a 2-hour delay while everybody waited for the rain to clear up. This time was added to the existing race time, the equivalent of 2 laps, which left us with a total of 40 minutes until the 3-hour period was up. This resulted in a sprint race that lasted 40 minutes, and the teams had to bring out the best out of their tacticians when it came to tyre management, which saw them change from full wet to intermediate tyres. Eventually, the race had to end, and points have to be given to the participants, which brings us to the final part of the FIA's regulations, and that is Article 5.4, the one that actually decides how points are given to the drivers based on where they finish the race. According to Article 5.4, if a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed, points for each title will be awarded in accordance with the following criteria, depending on what percentage of the race is finished. A key part of this is that cannot be resumed, which is why every F1 fan was confused as to whether or not the drivers should receive the full amount of points. Article 5.4 presents a rule that gives points to the drivers based on the race distance rather than the time elapsed. Going into the Japanese GP, there was always a chance for Verstappen to be crowned a world champion, as he needed to be 8 points clear of Leclerc and 6 points clear of Perez at the end of the race. The Suzuka GP was 52.8% completed, meaning that the points would be given out to the drivers from column 3 of Article 5.4. This would mean that Verstappen would have been granted 19 points, Perez 14 and Leclerc 12, and Max wouldn't have been an F1 champion. Even Red Bull themselves thought that this would be the process of awarding points, as they discussed whether or not to pit Max when it comes to the attempt of the fastest lap. Now, what is the key point that people, even Red Bull, forgot to interpret correctly? Well, we've mentioned it earlier in this video, and that is the phrase "and cannot be resumed." The points that we spoke about earlier in this video would have been awarded to the F1 drivers if they weren't able to finish the race, or more precisely, the race would have ended under the red flag. To make things easier for you to understand, if something happened yet again and the race had to be stopped, regardless of a crash or heavy rain, the drivers would have received the points that are bound for them thanks to Article 5.4. However, the drivers managed to complete the race, although with a shortened timeline, and that is why the FIA decided to award the drivers with the full amount of points. So, there aren't any controversies at all, and the FIA interpreted the rules just as they should. The foul mouths are always going to be here to take away Max's second championship and try to involve the FIA yet again as the helping hand for Max. In reality, Max had a dominant season, and nobody can take that away from him. He is just way too dominant this season, and even Leclerc himself said that the penalty that was given to him at the final corner of the final lap was a fair one, because he cut the corner and didn't leave one car width for the Mexican.
Oh, guys, what an amazing race.
With that being said, we hope that you now understand how the points system works and how points are given in situations where races are interrupted due to unfortunate events like crashes or rain. What do you think about the 2022 World Champion? Let us know in the comments below.